Hello and welcome to Four Quick Cues Book Talk with Enfys. This is the live interview chat show where I ask pagan authors 4 quick questions determined by a roll of the dice. If you have questions for our guest today, please pop them into the comments and we will circle around to them at the end. I'm your host, Enfys Book of MajorArtQueerna.com. Joining me today is Durgadas Allon Duriel, whose pronouns are they and he, is a licensed clinical social worker and a certified holistic health practitioner working in private practice. They're a formal practitioner of magic with more than 20 years of experience and have practiced yoga and meditation for over 15 years. They hold a master's degree in social welfare from UCLA and are the author of this very recently released book, Worthy as You Are, Weed Out Unhealthy Beliefs and Nourish Your Authentic Self, as well as the little work, Magic to Transform Your Everyday Life. Durgadas, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be on.
I'm so glad to have you here. So one of our traditions on the show is I ask our guests to name the dice for the purpose of the evening. And so this one is kind of a lovely little clearish amethyst one. It's a little bigger than most of my D20s, but what would you like to name the dice this evening?
Burdock.
Murdoch. Love it.
Oh, Burdock.
Oh, Burdock. Yes. Okay. Both very good names. I'm just going to jot that down so I don't forget it along the way. So have you ever been interviewed by a dice before?
No, this is a very exciting first experience for me.
Fantastic. First time for everything. Well, Burdock, let's get our first question going. Ooh, we get our critical fail question number 1 right out of the gate. Tell us about a magical mistake you've made and what you learned from it.
Yeah, so okay, I don't know if I would use the word mistake, but like a magical fail for sure. Once upon a time when I was going to grad school, there was one school that I wanted to go to or thought I wanted to go to. And I definitely turned up the heat a bit in terms of the mojo I was working for that process. And then that was the only school I didn't get into out of all the ones that I applied to. But then years later, I really appreciated how that would have been like the wrong choice for me. Looking back in hindsight, like it was definitely better for me to live in a different area and do different things. And so one of the things that I learned from that was really to just like trust more, leave the details out of situations like that. Like, and a lot of the magic that I do now is much more centered around deferring to sort of higher forces that I am allied with, that I believe have a greater perspective of what's like spiritually beneficial for me than I do. But that was probably like one of the bigger face plants where I really had like a set thing that I was trying to do, and it just did not happen that way. Yeah.
Yeah. It is sometimes helpful and sometimes very frustrating how the powers that be may say, yeah, you think you want that, but you don't really. Yeah. And learning how to, learning how to structure our magic so it's more about what we want to get out of a thing as opposed to like, I want to do this specific thing.
Yeah.
Is one of those hard-won lessons, I think.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I feel like I'm often not that way, but in that particular situation, I very much was. And I can clearly see in hindsight how that would not have been a good call. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad it ended up for the best anyway around it.
Thank you.
So, all right, let's go question number 2, number 8. What is something you wish other magical or pagan authors would do more?
So I'm very active on Twitter, right? So there's different social media platforms, obviously. And I would like to see more discussion of like what people are actually doing, what their practices actually are, or like what meaning they're deriving from their practices, how their practices are benefiting them, how they're enriching them, things like that. I feel like there's a lot of arguing on social media or posturing on social media or just sort of all kinds of things in that direction. And I don't know, I feel like what I find really motivating and inspiring is hearing about what people's practices are like for them, what their spiritual path is like for them, how it's enriching for them or moving for them, or, even cool things that they're learning. that would be great too, right? What are some neat things that I've learned recently in my studies or my practices? Yeah, so more of that. I think I would like that.
I like that. Yeah, I enjoy following you on Twitter. And one of the things I really appreciate is I think you posted about the eclipse today and
Oh
some
yeah.
of like the astrological stuff that's going to be going on. And since astrology is not my main axe, like I've been learning more about it and it's still one of those areas I'm still kind of a noob. I really appreciate that kind of practical recommendations and FYIs kind of stuff as well.
Cool, cool. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, this is a big astrological moment. So very much a rest and digest versus active eclipse. I mean, the eclipses are always more rest and digest, but new moons normally can be a lot of different things. This one, it's important to be careful about what we do just in the time of the actual eclipse itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got the full moon eclipse coming up right on election day in the US, which should be very interesting as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
hopefully for good.
hopefully for good.
All the fingers crossed.
Mhm.
All right. And just a reminder to folks who may be watching this live, we will be taking questions from the audience at the end. So please feel free to drop those in the comments in the chat if you wish. Question number 3 from Burdock is number 2. Tell us about a collaboration or collaborative work that you're excited about, either yours or someone else's.
Okay, so there is a collaborative work that is in process with a bunch of animistic astrologers on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything else about it. I know Diana Rose Harper, who's an amazing astrologer, I think she's the editor of it or organizer of it. And then there's a person named Ari Saltwater Stars, I think is their handle, and maybe Amaya Rourke. Anyway, there's a bunch of like animistic astrologers on Twitter who have very beautiful content about just like innovative, beautiful content about the intersection between astrology and animism and self-care and social justice, social equity, and just really beautiful, innovative things to say about astrology. We're in a really cool moment in terms of the field of astrology and how it's developing and reconciling tradition with pioneering work. So I'm really excited for that. Like I said, I have no other details about it. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I heard about it and it sounds really cool.
That's awesome. Well, after the show, if you can give me those Twitter handles, I will throw those into the show notes as well for people to check out, because I want to follow them based on that recommendation. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, really cool people doing really interesting work. One of the things I love about Twitter, for all the things that are difficult about Twitter, is that it really does seem to be a hub of people who are doing pioneering work in various fields, including astrology or occultism. Yeah, it's really cool that way.
Yeah, I've been on Twitter since 2008, and
of
course there's definitely highs and lows, but the highs are really amazing. Like I've been able to have beers with my favorite author, and a lot of cool things have happened basically just because of Twitter. And I've found so many good book recommendations through Twitter. I think that's what keeps me there, is following whatever my favorite authors are excited about reading. I tend to get excited about reading and those things up as well.
That's cool.
Yeah. All right, 4th and final question from Burdock. We've got number 4. They're all single-digit ones today. I don't think we've had that in a while. What is a magical text you keep referring back to, and why?
Okay, so, and everyone, that's my loud neighborhood, by the way, you heard.
It's not too bad.
So I would say 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack, the tarot book. And it's just because it's so amazing. I just think Rachel is so insightful and so wise and so knowledgeable. And it's really not every day that someone is all 3 of those things, often sort of 1 or 2, but not all 3. So just such a command of the knowledge, and clearly practice too that informs the writing and the perspective. And just like, I think that's one of the best, if not the best, contemporary tarot book that dives deeper into the cards, right? That really rivals some of the older stuff from people who had a lot more time on their hands to be thinking about these things and writing about them. Yeah, so I would say that 78 degrees of, I mean, Rachel's just a gem across the board. So yeah.
Truly is. Yeah, actually her book on the Kabbalah is what started me pulling on the threads of queer Kabbalah, because she's the one who mentioned, hey, all the sphere names are gendered and they're a little not what you would think. So I was really excited by that. And yeah, I go back to 78 degrees of wisdom all the time. Like if I'm feeling stuck on a reading for myself and I'm just like, what am I not seeing in this card right now that I need to see? I'll go, like, that's the book I grab.
Yeah, she just has such a clear wealth of experience and information, and it's really beautiful. Also, like a good writer, you know what I mean? Just a really
Very
compelling
engaging.
writer. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It is tricky to find those sort of double or triple threats, people who are not only wisdom, but are also good teachers and also good writers and can express things in a way that is compelling and engaging and easy to understand.
100%. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I liked your book that I just finished reading
Thank you.
recently. So yeah, Worthy as You Are, I have been recommending this to a bunch of different people because with your bona fides in the field of psychology as well as your magical work, weaving together the concepts of how to work on your mental health issues with spirituality as a companion to cognitive behavioral theory is fantastic and really practical and really useful. And I'm starting to work through the exercises myself because I found them really, really compelling,
cool.
and some stuff that I've been trying to figure out how to approach in my own life. Like I know I need to work on this and I'm not sure what working on this looks like. This spells it out. So I love this. And thank you for writing this book.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad it resonated with you. Yeah, I mean, I try to write books that I feel are either like needed and I don't see other books like it around really the same way. So I'm really glad to hear it's resonating. But yeah, for people who are watching, what is kind of unique about it is I actually am trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. And some of that is pretty straightforward in the book, but then I also weave in my spiritual practice and experiences and sort of tie it all together based on what I've learned in my work as a therapist. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I said theory instead of therapy. I like at the last minute, I'm like, what's the T stand for again? Yes. Thank you for correcting me there. Yeah. What I like about it especially is that you're very clear throughout the book that like your spiritual practice is not a substitute for mental health care.
Right. Yes.
But it can be helpful, like
100%.
in the process, and how there are overlaps between psychology and spirituality and how to like work with those things together is really, really quite fascinating and beautifully written as well.
Thank you. And I'll say too, along those lines, like I think that sometimes people seek what they can better get from the one and the other on both sides of that. And so to talk about both topics really is more holistic in addressing some of those situations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to see if we have any questions from the audience at this point, and also share with the audience where they can find you online and where they can buy your latest book. If you'd like to tell us about something you're really excited about right now, maybe more about the book or any kind of events you have coming up, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I'll just say a little more about the book, which is that, so like, I think a lot of the straight up CBT books are really great, but not necessarily as affirmative. And CBT has a reputation for being kind of rigid and robotic. And my version of it is not like that at all. So that was part of why I wrote this book. And then a lot of self-help books are really great about affirmative material, but not necessarily as much about how do you actually challenge a thought, right? Like how do you actually explore a thought process in your mind and question it? And so that was part of the reason too, why I wanted to weave them together. And also like I've benefited from a lot of self-help books. That's part of why I write them. But like a lot of the old ones have some really problematic stuff that I feel like I can't really endorse. So that was a part of the other reason too, was to try to be like, here's the gold without, you know, some of this other stuff that's an issue.
Yeah, and I was talking about it with a friend who is particularly skeptical about self-help books as a
Oh
genre.
yeah.
But when I explained your approach to crafting affirmations and using them to kind of reprogram your brain around certain harmful beliefs, I really appreciated how you're not trying to go from I'm a horrible person to I'm an
Yeah.
amazing person in one
Right.
step, which kind of reinforces, like, you don't believe it, so you reinforce the negative belief.
Yes.
But like
Yeah.
taking it more gradually, like one sort of step at a time, I thought
Yes.
was really useful.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any questions from the audience, so I want to thank you again for being on the show and tell folks about what we have upcoming on Four Quick Cues. Next week, November 2nd, we have Ariana Serpentine on, who has written this book called Sacred Gender that's just about to come out. I'm just starting to read it. I've already highlighted, I think, 75% of the text. I'm going to need more highlighters to get through it. So I'm really excited about that. November 16th, we have Matt Oren on the show talking about Mastering Witchcraft, which is coming out also in November. And December 7th, we have Mortellus coming. And just to note, that episode starts a little earlier. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, where usually we start at 8 or 5, depending on which time zone you're in. Durgadas, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
For having me. I'm glad to have been here.
And everyone who's watching, I hope you have a great rest of your day.